Yeah. Okay.
So we're getting stuck on, I think, what is the loan to value ratio kind of thing. You talked about an average down payment assistance grant of $4,700, and because it's a not interest bearing loan that only has to be paid back upon resale, that's still enough to stop many of the mortgage financing by you or other people or banks for these things. So people, for the lack of the $4,700 being a loan, for it being a loan repayable upon resale, as opposed to a grant, it's shutting down everything.
I wouldn't say it's shutting down everything. I would say there is a limit to how much a borrower can borrow before a bank will no longer approve them. So when they borrow $10,000 from VHFA, that's okay. And that's why I'm saying that the existing DPA program is working. It's that if you wanted to add another $10,000 to help first generation buyers specifically, then they can't borrow $20,000 because then, yes, their LTV, their loan to value, gets out of whack and they no longer can qualify for the mortgage, is what we've seen. A lot of borrowers, they don't have a lot to put down. They are heavily mortgaging these properties to purchase them. And so they can't borrow a lot more without hitting the limit. Because remember, they can only borrow up to the appraised value. A mortgage lender, a cash buyer, can overbid for a home all day long. But a mortgage buyer can only go up to the appraisal. I mean, I just want to remind everyone of that. So if a home appraises at, I'm not good with math on the fly, but $200,000, they can borrow $200,000 for that home, but they can't borrow $202,000 to cover, they can't borrow that much more than the appraised value to cover the closing costs and the additional fees. Banks will only, every program is different. And so that's why there's maybe a little fluster in my voice, but no one is going to be approved for more than 103% of the appraised value for a mortgage. And so a lot of times folks need to mortgage most of that, and then they borrow the extra 3%, when I say 103, to cover those closing costs. But if you want to give them the ability to borrow an extra $10,000, that's not what they need. They don't need to borrow that. Does that make sense?
The question is there another way to structure this, what we're essentially making an investment in the future value of the home? Is there another way to structure that in some way that we achieve that purpose? Keep the amount that we put in as an additional value to the home, much like we talk about perpetual affordability, but without saddling the individual borrower with that, so that would affect their loan to value ratio.
That is such a good question. And I promise that we have thought about that. And so if you're not going to saddle the individual home buyer, then you're saddling the home with that investment, which means you are permanently investing in that structure instead. And that is where we get the shared equity model. And that is what we also proposed as the missing middle proposal, is putting that investment on the home and not the home buyer. And so there are some options of how to do that through either shared equity and or missing middle.
If the goal of the first-time homebuyer program was to essentially allow that person to be a home buyer and appreciate wealth over time, as most home buyers do, that would accomplish that. Because either way, short of giving that person a pile of money to begin with, so if they have no debt at all, The only way you're going to do that is with some sort of a shared equity model, unless you have a total grant program for that 10,000 or whatever amount of money.
Yes, if then the shared equity model is very successful at having that investment grow over time and and really make sure that home is affordable well into the future.
Now,
I
I
will
guess
say-
the question I have, Mara, though, is that the first-time home buyer project did not contemplate perpetual affordability, I gather, in terms of what we're doing here. And so my question is, could you contractually structure something, again, in which you have a shared equity model, let's say for that specific buyer, in which at a certain point of time, the first buyer has the option, if you will, to retire that debt upon sale. Not required to, but the option to do that, which you would accomplish effectively the same thing. In other words, you would still have that first-time home buyer be able to have the home without the strings of perpetual affordability by simply buying out the amount of money that the state put in to begin with at the end of the term when that person sells that home. I would think that you could structure that pretty easily.
Are you talking about in a shared equity model? I just want to make sure I'm following that someone
To provide an option.
I mean, that would be a fundamental change to the shared equity program, and we don't administer the shared equity program. And so I don't think that's a question for us that could really change that program in fundamental ways. If a buyer bought a home for a very low price, knowing that they were committing to sharing the equity, and then you're saying that they would then buy themselves out of that commitment, they now have received.
Calculate what that amount would be at the time of sale. But I'm just trying to say, is there a solution to the first-time home buyer problem without either A, creating a credit impairment on the one hand, or B, creating an outright gift to that person on the front end? Is there a third way to do that? And it would seem to me a modification of shared equity to allow a buyout at the end when the sale takes place of the home by the original buyer. That person then has an option as to which way to go.
I think that really undermines the benefits of the shared equity program. I mean, shared equity has been so successful. We talk about it with CHT because especially in Burlington and Chittenden County, where home prices have appreciated so much, you'd be losing. That home would then flip and be market rate, and we would not have the benefit of that structure as being an affordable home in the future. I'm
going with the first-time homebuyer program is you're not doing, as contemplated, if I understand it, it's not a shared equity program. It's getting someone to be able to buy a house.
Yes, with a modest loan.
There's no permanence to that, is there?
The permanence is that it's a revolving loan fund. And so the funds are available to another Vermont household to buy another home. And so that's how it's a permanent subsidy, is because that investment always stays available to the next first-time home buyer who qualifies for VHFA mortgage. But there also is a role for us investing in actual homes so that a neighborhood can remain accessible and affordable to lower income buyers.
I gotta make a suggestion because we really need to move on. This is what happens when you deal with something at the 11th hour. But I'm gonna suggest that we give Maura the authority within her existing appropriation for first generation home buyers to take the loan program and turn it into a grant if she sees value in doing it. She's sitting on a fair amount of money right now. She's not giving out in loans as much as she has available. So if she feels comfortable out of her existing pot of money to convert either a forgivable loan or into a grant, in this legislation, we wouldn't be spending any more money, but we give her the authority to do that in her wisdom if she sees fit, with the understanding from both perspectives. We're gonna continue to look at this when it goes through finance and other places and in the House, and we can understand it better, but at least it's a placeholder that doesn't cost us any more money, and potentially, if Maura thinks it's more valuable, she'll get more takers for first generation people to get it as a grant, she would have that
That's
authority.
right.
But I would ask that if we do that, that we ask Mara to, again, do some additional research with the lending community to find if there's another way to structure this so that it does not affect the loan to value ratio of the borrower.
We can add that sentence, sure. I think that's at this point in time, I think that's an elegant solution that keeps it front and center. It potentially gives the grants to the first generation people. She has more money than she's spending right now, so maybe she feels she can do that. And maybe she has individual buyers. We've given her a lot of discretion in this program. It's just individual buyers where it will work as a grant, but it won't work as a loan, and she can make that decision.
Would that work, Maura?
Enabling legislation.
Yeah, enabling.
It would. I'm looking at draft 10.1 and this language is on page 12 that you've added. And I would ask for clarity's sake that you add the word grant to that new language under D. It says the agency may give priority to or reserve a certain amount of funding for, I'd ask you say grants to first-time homebuyers who are also first-generation homebuyers, because all the preceding language to that section only contemplates loans. It's very clear that we can only loan out this money. And I think you would need to say grants to in order to make
Either that or put another sentence in after that that says the agency is authorized to a certain amount of at its discretion to use a portion of the funds for grants to first-time home buyers, and then add that language also that you will study the issue of the issue of doing lending that would not affect the loan to value ratio, whatever the language is. Basically, to try to find a solution other than outright grants is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
That you have the discretion, but you have the responsibility of looking for an alternative solution.
Sure.
And we'll continue to work on this. So we'll deal with David on this afterwards. I think what I'd like to do, as opposed to trying to draft that unless people have objections, if we can get David to present the other stuff, and with the understanding, as we've just described, that we'll make that change, we can do that. I can do that over the lunch hour. People will review it. If they have any objection, that's fine. And I just don't want to go back up and redraft and stuff. That's fine. So David, what do you have for us, and what's the best way to show it to us at this point? On the screen, or we have to pick out copies of the versions? I don't know, you just hear that one.
That's up to you. I think easiest, quickest is just to show you on the screen. If Scott wants to share that, are you able to do so?
If you send me the latest draft.
So I believe I have sent 11.1 to the committee's email. True.
Okay. David Hall, 11.1, yep, 11:12 came into mind.
I don't have it yet.
That's about it. Wes?
I don't either.
I sent it to the committee's group list in our system, which I believe you were on, right?
I got the
Great.
one you sent this morning, but it was about 5 minutes or so after that. That's right.
Okay, so
So
the only-
I got one 7 minutes ago. That's went to Senate Economic Development.
As I open it, it says draft 10.1, I assume
Oh.
just change that, David.
Yeah, The bottom right, the footer should say .11. And
Does,
it's,
okay.
I don't know why it's no longer updating the header. When it updates the footer, it just stops doing it. So it's not sure if I can change that, but
So let's see if we can, did you highlight in yellow the changes? So,
I did. And another technological glitch is that if you open it as an attachment through an email, it doesn't show highlights. You have to open it as a Word
just
document.
direct us to the page then.
Yeah. So, consequence being that I also have to open it in my Word in order to be able to see my own highlights. But I have it now, and scroll.
Now, you sent this as an email to us, or?
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't get it. Let me check spam.
Yeah, I don't know.
Usually the last person. And I
It's
found
not
it
in
right
my
away.
spam.
It's not spam.
I'll forward it, I'll try forwarding it.
Yeah, why don't you forward it to the committee? To Senate Economic Film.
That's
Well-
what David did. I'm gonna forward just to you individually. and send
To
it
Scott, and to Scott.
right.
I can talk you through the themes. Page 15 over in the section 10, VHCV, large employer, etc. Component of the bill, we changed 100 employees to become 50 or more full-time equivalent employees.
Okay.
So that's a change. So for this record, I'm David Oliver, City Council. This is draft 11.1 of S226. On page of my draft, page 19 of 50, we're in the municipal bylaw modernization grant portion of the bill. And the change was to go from 10% to 6%
Right.
for the
Right, for the
administration.
staffing, for the administration.
So that change I made, and that's section 11, again, the bylaw modernization grant administration cost. Oh, excellent. Look at that, Scott. You're there. So I believe at this point,
Oh, it just came in.
Yeah, mine just came in as well.
11:23 it arrived.
From me or?
No, from David Hall.
Yeah.
I had to,
You guys gotta get some Apple computers.
I have an Apple computer.
Okay, sorry.
so Scott, if you wouldn't mind advancing us to page 33. So you'll see here in section 24, too far.
You're doing missing bills.
Yes, this is on, well,
Mine starts on page 31.
yeah, somehow they're different. I don't know why. Scott, it's actually your 31. Thanks. I'm sorry about that. So you'll see here, section 24, missing middle.
Yeah.
So if you can just move to the highlights. I just broke this out into the fiscal years, 5 million in 22, 10 million in 23. I moved up the definition of affordable owner-occupied housing, just so we, have that up front. I made sure that this section actually uses that term as defined. So you'll see in subsection C here, the agency shall use funds appropriated in this section to provide subsidies for new construction or acquisition and substantial rehabilitation of affordable owner-occupied housing, as we've just defined it. I've made the subsidy a new subsection just to set it off clearly in everyone's mind. So under this new D, the total amount of subsidies for a project shall not exceed 35% of eligible development costs as determined by the agency, which the agency may allocate between the developer and the home buyer consistent with the following. So that will break it out. If you can scroll down, please, Scott. So one, the developer subsidy, the agency may provide a direct subsidy to the developer, which shall not exceed the difference between the cost of development and the assessed value of the home is completed. Two is the home buyer subsidy portion. So if any remaining amounts available for the project after the developer subsidy, the agency may provide a subsidy to the home buyer, reduce the cost of purchasing the home, provided that A, the agency includes conditions in the subsidy or uses other legal mechanism to ensure perpetual affordability of the home, or B, the agency uses a shared equity model that requires the agency to retain not less than 75% of any increased equity in the home.
That's, I like it, except I think A doesn't capture affordability like. So the concept in A was that whenever the grant, the home buyer subsidy was in dollars, that would be repaid upon resale.
That's much clearer.
Well, perpetual affordability is a much,
I don't know what that means.
and it's also, so, but it has to be repaid upon resale perpetually. So it, oh no. What you don't have in here, I guess, is you don't have the concept that we have about the subsequent home buyers have to be of the same income levels as this program starts out with. That's one thing you don't have. I think the way we described it in
So,
like, but basically the concept is what the administration originally came forward with, was that they would make sure that subsidy to the home buyer stayed with the home.
but it depreciates.
It depreciates over time, but let's say it's $50,000, that $50,000 discount stays with the home forevermore, less and less worthwhile, but it does. And then also the element of perpetual affordability in common parlance or whatever is that the person who comes in and buys this home that we're creating with our help is somebody who is of limited income. So you don't have a millionaire coming in and saying, here's cash and I want this home.
Right.
And it's out of reduced value. So we want to keep serving.
Okay, so I just need to add two conditions to 2A. One, that they repay the value of the subsidy, and two, that the property is sold to an income eligible buyer.
Right.
So let me ask Chris Donnelly, Jen, do we need to be specific that the value of the home buyer's subsidy stays with the home, or could that go back to the agency, whoever's administering this, for use, for similar uses?
And maybe more as a preference as well. My preference would be to leave the subsidy with the home.
Yeah.
Because we're investing in neighborhoods.
Right.
So that's one thing we need. And then something about permanently available to future buyers who meet the eligibility criteria in this section. That needs to modify both A and B.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Would that allow for times when a home, everyone agrees, no longer should be subsidy? There is a flexibility that is appreciated when I'm thinking right now of a home that's in the shared equity portfolio in Rutland. It has long struggled, and the agreement of everyone who funded this home, including the nonprofit, is that this home needs to come out of the shared equity program. It is too large, the taxes are too much, and they can't find buyers who qualify for this home and keep it in the program. And in that situation, with the agreement of everyone, that subsidy is getting repaid to the state, and that money will get redeployed. And I'm just wondering, does that rule out that the ability to do that with this language?
My guess is the answer is no, but at this point in time, I think we can give some flexibility as this bill moves along. That's going to be a rare bird.
It is going to be rare. I want to be very clear.
So,
Yeah.
that's gonna be good. So if we could just make sure that it remains first permanently available to future buyers who meet the eligibility criteria of the section. So that applies to either the shared equity model or the discount model, A or B. You know, people who come in and have to be under 120% above it. We start that mistake A.
Can you hear Michael, Maura? Okay, good.
Can I just ask a couple of questions to make sure? So in the construct of A, where what do they actually have to repay? Is that, I mean, are you saying that when they sell, or is it like the DPA, when they sell or refinance the property, they have to pay back the nominal value of whatever subsidy they received at the time they purchased it?
No, I think you have the way you phrased it in 2 may provide a subsidy to the home buyer. Okay, so the subsidy to the home buyer, as described in 2, shall essentially run with the home.
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking. So if VHFA gave the home buyer a $50,000 home buyer subsidy, what you're asking for is that when that house is sold or refinanced, they pay $50,000 back to VHFA?
No, it reduces the amount the next purchaser has to pay. That's the same for whether it's a $50,000 discount or whether it's the shared equity.
Oh, because these are the 2 options.
This is it's essentially a housing subsidy covenant. They're putting on the home.
Because so we have 2 options here, right?
Sure.
So in one option, they would put a percent back into a revolving fund, and one they wouldn't. Right.
The shared equity, how does Chris, the shared equity?
Does the shared equity mean?
It has a housing,
house, right?
yeah, it has a housing covenant, subsidy covenant on it that has a term of 99 years or more.
So the seller takes all the
It's 25% of the increased equity.
right, takes 25% of the,
And the other 75% goes to reduce the price of the house. That's
right. Right, that's what I, right.
Just mechanically, just trying to wrap my head around that, that means they sell the house, and if the value of the subsidy was $50,000, then you sell it, but then you have to take $50,000 from your proceeds and reduce the purchase price to the next purchaser. What if the value, I don't know if this is even possible, but what if the future sale is less than the value? What if you don't clear 50,000, you only clear 30,000? Is that even a possibility? With appreciation, is that not a possibility?
That is certainly a possibility. It's happened in other places in the country more often that people are underwater. I think this is a risk that people take when they become homeowners in general, whether you're market or subsidized. I do think that Maura can probably talk to how they've thought about that, those kind of situations, and whether there's some protections in this program for local providers.
That would be another example of where we were envisioning holding the homeowner harmless so that the amount that they would pay back all that they could, but then, and that would stay with the home, but we were going to hold the homeowner harmless in those situations.
I don't know if that changes anything for anybody. All right. The other question I have is we keep saying to buyers who meet the eligibility criteria. I guess it's a little bit unclear to me exactly. I may have missed some of the testimony. Is that all captured in the definition of affordable owner-occupied housing? Or is that just subject to VHFA or the shared equity organization's income criteria?
It's an excellent question. We've been talking for months literally about this program servicing the missing middle at 100 to 120% of AMI. And I don't know exactly. This was language, the original language was sent to us by VHFA. Did you specify who you were serving with this program? Or?
We had income limits on it, but otherwise, if you go to line 15, it talks about establishing an application selection process and plan. And so we're going to do that through a public process. We were going to set more, we envisioned setting the limits on the home, meaning the size, location, energy efficiency, and affordability and all that. We did not propose a program that was going to have us giving subsidies to home buyers. That's not the typical role that VHFA actually plays. We were going to work with developers. That's our role. And so honestly, my brain is still working through how this all would work, because this isn't what we had proposed.
Is there any problem from your perspective or from Chris or Jim's perspective of saying to specify that the owners of these homes, new construction and subsequent owners, shall be within the income range of 100 and 120% of poverty, or no more than 120% of poverty?
That we had always proposed and envisioned, so that's not a problem.
Let me just say that, as opposed to shall meet the criteria. I thought it was in there. Purchasers and subsequent purchasers of the home shall have incomes of less than 120% of
AMI.
So we have a hard stop at 5 to 12, right? We agreed that the stuff on next generation will trust that David has that right.
I'm sorry, may I just say one more thing about this section we were on? I just want to make sure the committee understands that VHFA does not administer the shared equity program in the state. VHCB gives considerable resources to support shared equity, and then the nonprofits who run shared equity programs build shared equity homes by applying for lots of different money, such as the state housing tax credits, but also new markets tax credits and other resources. So I just want to make sure the committee realizes that what you've done here is you are giving money to VHFA, and we will be using that to support shared equity model, which in some cases, as I said, we do because the tax credits that we award do support shared equity. But I just want to make sure.
I fully expect that you would work with subcontractors or other people to do some of the, some of the administration here, if that's appropriate. I don't think there's any prohibition on that. And if, as this bill moves forward, if you think it needs to specify that because you have concerns, we'd be happy to address that.
Okay, and there's no prioritization between 2A and 2B about how much goes into shared equity versus other models?
There is none. In one version, we said that the shared equity model should be prioritized to the extent it's feasible with any buyer, because I've heard the concern that you won't find buyers if you impose a shared equity model. But to the extent you do find buyers and it works, I think we would want priority to that. But at this point, I'm trying to add that in finance or some other point.
It is covered on the next page on line 4, where it does say that there's a priority for plans with deeper affordability and longer duration of affordability requirements. So maybe that.
That probably doesn't, but we could even be more specific. I'm more concerned at this point with how David has redrafted A.
Have I done it right now here?
Oh, I'm not saying you did or didn't, I'm just asking.
No, I haven't changed it yet. It sounds like you want to, rather than saying ensure perpetual affordability of the home, you want to say ensure that the value of the subsidy remains with the home.
Yeah.
Subsequent transfers, and then the change in a couple of different places is going to have to be that rather than saying the buyer, present or future, meets the income eligibility criteria of this section, it's going to say it's affordable to Vermonters with household incomes not exceed 120% of area median income. So those are the two things that I hear.
Now, I'm assuming that we are assuming, or at least recognizing, that the value of the subsidy will decline over time, just based on inflation, if nothing else.
Well, yeah, but that's what I was
You're talking
asking
the
about.
actual dollar value.
That's why I said, are they supposed to just transfer the nominal value of the subsidy versus is it supposed to be
A percentage
value
of the
plus
gain,
a percentage of the appreciation or
or a
tied to
percentage
inflation
of
or?
the gain would be one of the ways to deal with that.
Right, so that was sort of the,
That's been one of the main criticisms of the proposal that the
That's the
administration
problem.
has, is that the affordability element deflates over time. It's different from the traditional shared equity model. This version gives them a choice to do either or with a preference towards the shared equity model. The argument,
Option, where does it say a preference?
well, it did say a preference at one point. I sort of slipped out, but there was other language.
Right now,
But there's other language in there that Maura just pointed to. Where was that language, Maura?
that's
Oh,
down
yeah,
in
sub number
E.
7, priority
Yes.
for deeper affordability and longer duration of affordability requirements. So the B is clearly it's affordability heavy versus affordability light. And the reason that we were given from the administration as to why they wanted to just do affordability of light is that they wouldn't find any buyers in this income range that would take this help because they would be giving up on the appreciation that they have. I don't fully buy that, but this is where we are at this point.
So this gives them an option, so.
Well, 75% may be too high a number.
Well, there are other issues, yeah, I mean, that's the traditional model that's been used uniformly throughout the state. And
It's a great success. So
yeah,
yeah,
this
come
bill
to
has a
work.
ways to go.
It does.
I'm open to, you know, what happens in the next week and also to listening what the House says, but we're facing some deadlines here. And I think this is a reasonable compromise.
Yeah.
Was there anything else in yellow as we went through that you made changes to?
I mean, at the end, I added the language that you wanted on page, what's my page 50,
Your last page.
the last page, and also the effective date of the FY '22 appropriation, so that it's on passage.
Right.
So, having heard, I don't know, Senator Bell, if you heard a resolution of the next gen, but we all agreed on some language. It's not drafted yet, but people also said they felt comfortable voting the bill and getting the final version of the lunch. And then you just heard what David said about the two changes on perpetual affordability on this middle, which will have to be formally. But I would like to formally vote this at this point.
Yeah.
And
So should we just go back in briefly on the first generation solution? Because
still read on what the question was first.
so we had proposed in the bill that we have an additional amount for first generation purchasers, which Morris says really has to be grant and the housing community all support the notion, the value of enabling homeownership and had included it in some of their proposals. So it's a late date for us to fully vet that as much as we would like, and we are moving forward with it at the moment with $1 million. No,
Just
remind me what you decided to take it, put it in.
Putting it into the down payment assistance program, the existing program, which has money in it right now that's not being used.
And so we're giving Maura the authority to move from, in her granting, in her capacity, giving her discretion to do a loan or a grant.
As opposed to just a loan.
As opposed to a loan to first generation home buyers. And then this will get to the houses, gives us enough, it likes to get to the house and the house can get it more fully.
Okay. That's the changes forthcoming.
Keisha, are you okay with this? Okay.
Yeah, that piece. Yeah.
We'll have time for discussion, but I need a motion.
Oh, I'm not sorry. I was thinking of her as as our clerk, or is she ready for the vote?
Oh, that's right.
That's her. That's where my head was. Okay, that will be draft 11.1.
It'll be 12.
It'll be 12.1.
Yes.
I would move that we amend S226 with draft 12.1 as anticipated.
We have 5 minutes. Any discussion?
Are we voting the whole bill out after that? I was still hoping that we could hear back from Chris Cochran about a line or two around studying the.
Correct.
About the multi-units.
Yeah, but I think we ended that conversation with the concept that I would try and get that in finance or appropriation, but you can phrase that in any number of ways, and we want to phrase it as more less threatening as possible, so we get what you want.
Yeah, all clear, Senator Hinsdale?
Well, that's what, I mean, we went through this before, and it just got framed in the House. So I think it behooves us to do it, but we need to have more work done in stages. So we're just going to put study language in, I will draft it, and I think it won't be a problem for anybody. But I won't get into this draft. Okay, set her up. Insel?
Yeah, but I missed like where that will, if that goes in before we vote on it, or we're working on it for putting it in the next committee stop it has.
I think the latter, because I think it needs some work, and if, and nobody has seen the language yet on the other two things, we know what the language is gonna say, and we just don't know what this language is yet, so I would put it in finance or appropriation or on the floor. I mean, it's just a study, so I don't think people are gonna have a problem.
Right. I would hope people have no problem. I mean, like I said, people were really watching that multi-unit, multi-family language and excited about it, so as long as we're indicating that by the time it passes, we're trying to create some forward momentum on reducing barriers to creating more multifamily housing. I'm okay with that. I hope it's just communicated to the next committee, and otherwise we can see it on the floor.
In fact, we'll have it drafted, we'll talk about it here tomorrow, and when most of finance, I'll present it there. And in fairness, I think whether that was in the original bill, it probably was, I don't know, but in all the drafts we've had, I think it's been misunderstood what was in there. It wasn't increasing density, it was given more flexibility how to achieve existing density. So,
We're on the amendment. We have a motion on the floor for the amendment up to adapt 12.1.
anybody have discussion? Okay. Sarah, we call the roll.
Yep. Senator Ballin,
Yes.
Senator Brock,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes,
myself, Senator Hinsdale, yes, Senator Sorokin.
Yes. I want to thank everybody for their patience. It's been a long haul. But I think we have a really good bill here that hopefully will promote housing. And as I've said.
I think we now have to move the bill.
Oh, excuse me, you are correct.
I believe, so I'm going to move that we adopt S226 as amended.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson.
Are we ready?
I call the roll.
Okay, Senator Ballin,
Yes.
Senator Brock,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes,
myself, yes, Senator Sorokin.
Yes.
Okay, so the amendment and the bill pass 5-0-0.
Thank everybody. I've always said about housing is that it's mostly about money, and it still is mostly about money, but there are a lot of policies you can make that help things along, and that's what this bill is about. So.
thank you.
To make progress, I think probably we'll need to do some things like the grants and stuff that we really have to look at
I know.
carefully further.
Thank you, Maura.
Just been asking about, yes, I voted in favor of it, but I did so.
So glad. Thank you.
Your pat answer. For all of us.